Let's go Broncos! What if I told you the Denver Broncos just made a play that could completely change the balance of power in the AFC, and most people still haven't grasped the magnitude of it? Before we get into the details, don't forget to like if you truly believe this team is ready to take the next step. And I want to see the optimists in the comments right now. Go Broncos! 2026 is our year. Now let's get straight to it, because what just happened with the acquisition of Jaylen Wad is not just a flashy headline move, it's a calculated, aggressive decision that shows exactly where this franchise believes it stands right now. The Denver Broncos didn't just make a trade, they made a statement. And here's the part that a lot of fans are still trying to process. This deal is actually sweeter for Denver than it might look at first glance. Yes, they gave up a first-round pick, a third-round pick, and a fourth-round pick. On paper, that sounds expensive, but when you break it down, you're essentially trading the 30th overall pick and additional capital for a proven, elite playmaker who already has over 5,000 receiving yards in his first 5 seasons. That's not potential, that's production. And let's be honest here, what are the chances you land a player of that caliber at pick number 30? Very slim. On top of that, the Broncos didn't walk away empty in terms of draft flexibility. They actually improved their position in the 4th round, moving up significantly while still holding valuable picks that could be used to maneuver around the board. There's already strong belief internally that Denver could package those picks to move up into the 3rd round if needed. That's not losing control of your draft, that's controlling it smarter. But the biggest win here goes beyond draft math. This move is about identity. The Broncos are no longer sitting back and hoping young players develop into stars. They are actively bringing in proven difference makers. This is what teams do when they believe they are close, not rebuilding, but reloading with intent. And it's clear, the organization believes this roster is ready to compete at the highest level. Adding Jaylen Wad fills one of the most glaring needs on this team, a dynamic offensive weapon who can beat man coverage, destroy zone schemes, and stretch the field vertically. This is something the Broncos simply did not have consistently last season. Defenses were able to focus heavily on Courtland Sutton, often bracketing him and forcing the offense into uncomfortable situations. That changes immediately now, because what makes this even more dangerous is how perfectly Wad complements what's already in place. He's not just another receiver, he's a player who forces defenses to make impossible choices. If they shift attention toward him, Sutton gets favorable one-on-one matchups. If they focus on Sutton, Wad becomes a nightmare in open space. And here's something that really stands out when analyzing his impact, his ability to produce in critical situations. We're talking about 3rd downs, long yardage scenarios, vertical routes, areas where games are won and lost. He consistently delivered explosive plays, even against high-level defensive coverage. That's the kind of player you don't wait to draft. That's the kind you go out and get. Financially, the situation is even more favorable in the short term. His cap hit for 2026 is incredibly manageable at just $4.9 million. That's essentially the cost of a first-round rookie, except instead of a prospect, you're getting a fully developed, elite contributor. It's a rare window where performance and cost align perfectly for a team trying to push for a championship. Looking ahead, yes, the numbers rise in 2027 and 2028, but the Broncos have multiple ways to manage that. Extensions, restructures, and a rising salary cap all give them flexibility. And more importantly, this gives them time to evaluate, time to build around him, and time to maximize this current competitive window. Another key factor that can't be ignored is timing with the quarterback situation. This is a crucial phase, and adding a weapon like Wad now provides immediate support during what could be one of the most important developmental periods for the offense. And let's not forget something else that often gets overlooked, roster reality. Before this trade, the Broncos had 9 draft picks. Now they have 7. But realistically, how many rookies were actually going to make a meaningful impact on a roster that already has 71 returning players? The answer is, not many. So instead of banking on uncertain contributions, Denver chose certainty. They chose impact. They chose aggression. And maybe most importantly, they chose to act like a team that believes it belongs in the Super Bowl conversation. And this is where things get even more interesting, because when you zoom out and really analyze what the Denver Broncos just did, you start to see a bigger picture forming. One that goes beyond just adding a star wide receiver. This move changes the entire structure of the offense. We're not just talking about production. We're talking about how defenses are going to be forced to play against Denver from week 1. Because last season, opposing teams had a very clear strategy. Take away Courtland Sutton, force the ball elsewhere, and live with the results. That approach worked more often than not because the Broncos didn't have another player who could consistently punish that decision. Now, that strategy becomes dangerous. Because if defenses continue to bracket Sutton, Jaylen Wad is going to exploit every inch of space they leave behind. And we're talking about a receiver who has already proven he can dominate in multiple areas of the field, short routes, intermediate zones, and especially deep vertical threats. And here's something that should get every fan excited. The vertical game is officially back in Denver. Both Wad and Sutton ranked among the top players in the league when it came to vertical receptions last season. That means this isn't just about adding speed, it's about redefining how explosive this offense can be. When you have two players who can consistently win deep, defenses can't sit in too high safety looks all game long. They can't stack the box. They can't cheat toward one side. It becomes a pick your poison situation. And when that happens, everything else opens up. The run game becomes more effective because defenses are forced to respect the deep threat. Play action becomes more dangerous, especially in the red zone where small mistakes turn into touchdowns. Younger receivers on the roster get easier matchups and more space to develop. This is how a good offense becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability is what wins games in January. Another key detail that can't be ignored is how Wad performed when he had to step into a larger role. When Miami needed him to take over, he didn't just hold his ground, he elevated his game. He handled high-pressure situations, converted on crucial downs, and proved he can be that true number one option when called upon. That matters a lot, because now the Broncos don't just have a supporting piece, they have a player who can take over a game if needed. And let's talk about Courtland Sutton for a second, because he might actually be the biggest winner in all of this. For years, he's been the focal point of opposing defenses. Double coverage, bracket schemes, constant attention, and still producing. Now imagine him with single coverage. That's a completely different scenario. We're talking about a player who already wins contested catches at a high level, now getting cleaner looks, more space, and better opportunities downfield. This could realistically unlock the best version of Sutton we've seen yet, even at this stage of his career. And internally, this is exactly what the Broncos are betting on. They're betting that pairing these two creates a ripple effect across the entire offense, one that elevates everyone, not just the stars. But there's also another layer to this that fans need to pay attention to: depth. Last season exposed a major issue when injuries or situational changes forced the Broncos to rely on players who ideally shouldn't have been in those high-pressure moments. Now, with Wad in the mix, the team not only upgrades the top end of the roster but also strengthens the overall depth at the position. And that's critical, because championship teams aren't just built on stars, they're built on depth that can sustain performance over an entire season. So when you put all of this together, the aggressive mindset, the roster construction, the financial flexibility, and the offensive transformation, it's hard not to see what the Broncos are aiming for. They're not waiting anymore. They're going for it. And moves like this don't happen unless there's full belief inside the organization, from the front office to the coaching staff, that this team is ready to compete at the highest level right now. Now it's all about execution. Because on paper, this might be one of the most exciting offensive setups the Broncos have had in years. But as we all know, paper doesn't win games, performance does. So now I want to hear from you. And that's exactly where the pressure now shifts, from the front office making the move, to the coaching staff and players proving that this wasn't just a bold decision, but the right one. Because let's be real for a second, when you push your chips to the center of the table like this, there's no more hiding. This is no longer a team that can say we're building or we're developing. Those phases are over. What the Broncos have done with this move is accelerate expectations instantly. You don't trade premium draft capital for a proven playmaker unless you believe you're ready to win right now. And inside that building, that belief is very real. The message is clear. This roster is good enough, and now it's about maximizing it. One of the most fascinating parts of this entire situation is how the offensive identity is going to evolve moving forward. Because with a player like Jaylen Wad, you're not just plugging him into the system,